Not too long ago, you could only find coupe SUVs with high-end brands. BMW started it with the X6. A lot of people hated it, a lot of people loved it, and now everyone is doing it. Today, we have two mainstream manufacturers with coupe SUVs under 20 lakh rupees. Both get a turbo petrol engine, both get 6-speed manual gearboxes, and both get that all-important sloping roofline.
While both the Tata Curvv and Citroen Basalt are coupe SUVs, there's a significant difference in their character when it comes to the design. The Basalt is more rounded and softer on the corners, whereas the Curvv is edgier and sharper. Dimensionally, they are neck and neck, with the Basalt edging ahead in terms of length and wheelbase, while the Curvv takes the lead in height and width. On the face, both the Basalt and the Curvv bear similarities to their respective siblings, the Aircross and Nexon. It is only in profile that you immediately see the USP. The sloping roofline on the Basalt blends well with the boot and almost looks like a 3-box design, while on the Curvv it extends all the way to the rear with no break in the flow. The Curvv also has an advantage with its bigger 18-inch wheels compared to 16-inch alloys on the Basalt, and the design is slightly funkier too. The Curvv also gets flush door handles, unlike the old school flip-up handles seen on the Basalt. The rear looks more dramatic on the Curvv with a connected LED strip and sharp tail lamps, while the Basalt relies on a simpler individual tail lamp setup, albeit with a 3D effect for the housing. Safe to say, if you want more drama and wow factor, the Curvv is the better choice. However, the Basalt offers a more proportionate stance and an easy on the eye design that buyers greatly appreciate.
Now both cars are clearly very different on the outside when it comes to the design, and when it comes to the interior, it's the same story. The Curvv and the Basalt are totally different. Inside the Basalt, you don't really feel like you're sitting in a concept car, not in a modern car, but it does get some interesting detailing, especially when it comes to the dashboard design. It's a very quirky look, lots of piano black, you have some textured material as well, and overall build is not too bad, but it does feel like a step back when you see the Curvv that has all these soft touch materials and different colored panels. That said, bear in mind the Basalt is based on the C3, which earlier did not get a lot of features and equipment. However, they have upped their game now and the cabin is a lot better equipped. You get a nice touchscreen in the center, very slick to use, very responsive, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You have a rear view camera as well. Low down, you have an automatic climate switch gear, so that's a nice touch. Below that, you have some space to keep loose items, and you also have a wireless charger with 2 cup holders as well. In the center, you have an adjustable armrest and a small cubby hole as well. And overall, the seats are again very nice, soft, very well supportive, and even large frame adults can be quite comfortable here for long drives as well. Adjustable for height, so you do have some variation in your seating position, but the steering is only adjustable for rake and not reach. Apart from that, you have a digital instrument cluster. You have some modes in there that you can change about. A lot of information, TPMS as well. So yeah, it is a pretty well packed car, but in light of the Curvv, it does feel a step back just because the Curvv gets so much more on offer. Now inside the Tata Curvv, the interior looks like a proper modern day, present day cabin. It's all very minimalistic. Most of it is housed in the screen. Now that's a good thing and a bad thing because you have this nice seamless look to the cabin, and I really like the whole burgundy and silver that's going on. The design and the color theme is very nice and very upmarket. But I have the issue that is the center console and the climate control switches. Now, of course, the main switches that you're going to use the most, the fan and the temperature, are physical toggles, so that's good, but everything around it is on a gloss black panel. It's already picked up a lot of scratches, reflections, so it's very hard to look at and very hard to read as well. What's also difficult to read is the digital instrument cluster. Of course, it's larger than the Basalt, but it is set quite further back and the font is small, so you do tend to squint your eyes every now and then. Then you have the seats. You have electric control for the driver, manual seats for the passenger, but they are a bit too snug. So large frame adults will find the Basalt a bit more comfortable. But in terms of support and just the overall seating position, it is quite nice. Even at its lowest setting, you are seated nice and high. The dashboard is low, so you have a nice commanding view out, and it does feel like you're driving a big car. And equipment wise, because this version is much pricier, you get a lot more on offer. Panoramic sunroof, electronic parking brake, drive modes. We'll find out how those work in a bit. You have a Type-C port, a USB-A port, and it just feels like a much better car. The touchscreen also, again, wireless connectivity like on the Basalt, so wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, but you also get a very crisp 360-degree camera in here. That is very useful.
Safe to say that the Curvv gets the more appealing interior of the two, but on coupe SUVs, the rear seat space plays a big role, especially in the headroom department.
Now, while the front seat of the Tata Curvv is nice and premium, the rear seat is where it loses some points, primarily because of the space. Now, it doesn't have the wheelbase that you get on the Basalt, but you do have some decent knee room. That's not an issue. The main issue here is the roof that tapers quite sharply and the panoramic sunroof, which has the mechanism housed right here. Nikhil, when he did his review, found the headroom to be tight. He's just under 6 feet. I'm just over 6 feet. So for me, it's even worse. And yes, you do get a one-step recline for this seat. So if you just recline it, it's not really helpful because you end up resting your head on the headrest, and that means it definitely touches the roof then. So not a comfortable spot if you're over 6 feet, but in terms of space and the overall room on offer, it is not too bad. You have a center armrest with 2 cup holders, you have AC vents at the back, a USB-A port, a Type-C port, and of course the panoramic sunroof, like I mentioned, brings in light, but it does eat away into the headroom. So that's something you need to look out for. In terms of under thigh support, it is a decent seat and overall cushioning is much better than on the front. It is a lot more accommodating. So long hours in this seat won't be an issue. Again, the headroom is the only thing that will probably get in your way. Now in the back seat is where the Basalt gains some points because you have more wheelbase than you have on the Curvv. As a result, knee room is not a problem at all. Even if you're over 6 feet, you can sit comfortably back here. Now, under thigh support is also very good. These are not the seats that we saw on the first drive that got the extendable under thigh support, and still you have a good amount of support for your thighs. So that's a very good thing. You have some space under the seats for your feet as well, and the big one on coupe SUVs, headroom. Now, headroom on the Curvv isn't all too great, especially when you keep your head flat on the headrest. On the Basalt, it is much nicer. Yes, my hair is brushing, but it's not hitting the roof as it was on the Curvv. So that's a bit of an advantage for the Basalt as well. You get AC vents in the back, 2 USB-A ports, and you have a center armrest with 2 cup holders and some space to keep your phone as well. 3 3-point seat belts, but they do not get load sensors. So if you don't have anything back here, make sure to buckle them up. Otherwise, it'll keep beeping up there. That's the back seat, a very comfortable place overall and much better than the Curvv.
Both SUVs are close in terms of boot space, but the Curvv gets the bigger 500-litre boot compared to the 470-litre on the Basalt. And while the difference is not much in theory, the Curvv's boot with its wide opening and low lip is the easier one to load.
Both these coupe SUVs are powered by a 1.2-litre 3-cylinder turbo petrol engine, and that is where the similarities end, because what Tata gets here is a new Hyperion 1.2-litre turbo petrol direct injection engine, 125 horsepower and 225 Newton meters, which is considerably more than what you get on the Basalt. However, the outright performance is slightly different. We'll get to that, but let's start off with refinement. Now, on this engine, you hear a slight thrum at idle, but vibrations are very well contained, and as you move along, they are completely eliminated. So it's a nice smooth engine on the move, and you really don't feel that 3-cylinderness coming through it. And when it comes to acceleration, this new engine is a lot better compared to what you got earlier with the older Nexon. That 120 horsepower engine just didn't move, it just didn't have that poke and grunt. This one does solve a lot of those problems. Bottom end is much improved. You have a good amount of mid-range as well, and power is available a lot frequently. What you also get to aid that are drive modes between City, Eco and Sport, and obviously as you change them, they change the characteristics. Eco chokes down the power slightly, Sport amps up the response. So at no point do you feel like this is an underpowered car or it needs a bit more power. Mated to the engine is a 6-speed manual gearbox. Now, the clutch is nice and light, but the gear throws are a bit too long, and the clutch bite point is a bit snappy, it's a bit abrupt. So you can't really gauge where exactly the clutch is being engaged, and in traffic, that is a bit of an issue because you have that long clutch travel. It's light, so it's not a lot of effort, But then when you are ambling about, when you're shuffling between first and second, you do tend to bog down the car quite often.
The Curvv then is an easygoing SUV, but when it comes to driving, the Basalt takes things up a notch.
Alright, now while Tata has done great with that petrol engine, they've not managed to make it as great as this one. This 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbo petrol engine with less horsepower, 110 horsepower, and less torque at 190 Nm is a lot more fun. Okay, I started with refinement on the Curvv. Let's start with refinement on the Basalt as well. At idle, you do feel a fair bit of vibrations on the steering, on the seat. In fact, the whole car really sort of rattles about. But as soon as you get going, it all smoothens out. And as soon as you get going, you sort of forget about the rattling as well, because the engine is absolutely beautiful. Off the line response is terrific. You have a good amount of mid-range, so no matter what, you just have that torque available at all the right times, and it's almost as if this engine eggs you on to push it. And what complements this engine is, of course, the manual gearbox, 6-speed manual, and it is much better to use than the Tata because the gates are so well defined, so the gears slot in perfectly, and the clutch is nice and progressive, so you know exactly where the bite point is. Now the downside is that the clutch is a fair bit heavy, so everyday driving in the city in traffic between first and second, you are going to curse your left foot. It is going to be quite painful, but get it out on an open stretch and it just works. Everything is in your favor.
Both the Tata and Citroen are leaders when it comes to ride quality. They have always pipped the competition, so in a head-to-head, it is extremely close.
On the first drive, we were very impressed with how the Curvv rode, and well, it's the same story. Despite having 18-inch wheels, it takes bad roads really well.
Bump absorption is excellent and it feels tough and ready to take on a battered road. Get it cruising on the highway and it will sit happily at triple-digit speeds very confidently. The only downside is over low-speed bumps where the Curvv feels firm.
Alright, so ride quality always been a Citroen highlight, and on the Basalt it's no different. I mean, on the first drive we were left very impressed, and even compared to the Curvv, it just shines because that soft suspension setup is absolutely perfect for our battered roads. When you have sharp bumps, low speed bumps, which is what we encounter more in the cities, it just doesn't give you that sharp jolt on the inside. It soaks it up very well. You do move about and you will feel the bump, but you won't feel the harshness, and I think that is very important. Now the downside to that soft setup is that there is a fair bit of nosedive on braking, and if you tend to push this in the corners, then you do feel that roll coming in. But speaking of corners, handling is very good for what this is, and a lot of that credit goes to the steering, which has a lot of feel. It is very well weighted, it is consistent, it's not ultra light like the Curvv. So between maneuvering this and the Curvv is going to be easier in the city. But again, for that small group who cares a bit more about driving, this steering will appeal a lot more.
While they look quite different at first glance, the competition between the two is quite close. The Curvv prides itself on a 5-star Bharat NCAP safety rating, but the Basalt also holds a very respectable 4-star rating. Both cars stand out with their differentiated designs and offer a great ride. Where the Basalt edges ahead is in stronger engine performance, engaging driving dynamics, and a more spacious rear seat. Top spec to top spec, it also comes in significantly cheaper by a hefty 3.96 lakh rupees, making the Basalt priced at 12.70 lakh rupees great value. However, the Tata Curvv offers more equipment even on lower trims, although the entry price to the direct injection engine variant ranges from 14.16 lakh to 16.66 lakh rupees. What tips the scales towards the Curvv is a far more premium interior, better overall ride comfort, better refinement, an appealing road presence, and a much stronger dealer network, and all these factors would mean more to many buyers. Strong driving dynamics does have its audience, but it's not a big one. The Curvv is the more rounded SUV and hence our pick in this comparison.